Thank you, Adelina, for the very warm welcome. Stefan, thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. Um, why don't we start off with a little bit of your journey and a little bit of who is Stefan? How
Well,
did you get here?
yeah. Good morning, everybody. Let me say first and foremost, huge thank you for the opportunity to be here today with you. You might saw me sneak in yesterday just to get a little bit of a peek, and it was already a fantastic experience. Just the engagement of the audience, the questions you all brought to the panel discussions yesterday morning. It was impressive, and I certainly hope we have an opportunity later today to also you know, chat more. To your question, Nav, who is Stefan? Well, so you've heard in the quick introduction some of my more recent accomplishments. I want to take you back even earlier to kind of early Stefan, little Stefan. Actually, originally from Switzerland, grew up there. Uh, and in fact, after high school, decided that that the whole academic pursuit wasn't really my cup of tea at the time. So I joined Ciba in Basel, which nowadays is part of Novartis, and spent 5 years as a laboratory assistant, working, doing research. Actually, in the early days of biotech, uh, and I have to give credit to my then boss, who on multiple occasions reminded me that, "Oh, all the questions I asked, it was just too complicated. I didn't have the theoretical background, and therefore he didn't bother really answering the questions I had around science and the work I was doing," which got me to the point where I said, "You know what? I can learn this." And so I quit my job and I went back and actually did a bachelor's degree in Switzerland. And shortly after that, the opportunity presented itself to join a group at the ETH in Zurich, where my advisor, about a month into my PhD, announced that he was moving to the US. And that was really what got me to the US, to the United States 30 years ago. And as you've heard, there was a PhD and then, uh, the opportunity to join a university. Now you might wonder, why would one leave a tenured position? I was at Emory for 18 years, um, and tremendously enjoyed the academic field, the freedom to explore, pursue one's own ideas. Yet there was just kind of that limitations of having real like, implementing real solutions, having real impact on, in particular, patients, on the community. And so after 18 years, in 2019, I decided to explore something different, to look for an opportunity in an industrial environment. And, sometimes you get what you ask for. It really does happen. In my case, I signed the contract to join Codexis as head of research, and 2 weeks later, COVID-19 was official, the shutdown in the United States. Now with that came a unique opportunity because at the time, Codexis had worked with Pfizer on the development of a catalyst, an enzyme, an engineered enzyme for the manufacturing of a small molecule drug. And that drug at the time, nobody knew how to pronounce it. It was Paxlovid. And so in the midst of the pandemic, with social distancing, with shift work, because, you couldn't be too close to your coworkers. In those kind of circumstances, we had to ramp up, take that engineered enzyme from at the benchtop in a small test tube, scale it up to where within 6 months we started producing double-digit metric ton quantities of this catalyst to ship to Pfizer for production of Paxlovid, and I think Paxlovid nowadays is a household name. So again, you get what you ask for. I wanted real impact, and yeah, sure, I got it there. So it's been a tremendous journey. I do miss the classroom. I miss the opportunity to interact with incredibly talented, eager, enthusiastic young scientists. But, that's the trade-off.
And you gave us a bit of an insight there into Codexis. Could you tell us a little bit more about what
Sh
Codexis does and what it
Sure, yeah.
focuses on?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of Codexis before? Okay. Well, a few. So for the rest of you, Codexis is being a biotech or is a biotech company in Silicon Valley, little outside south of San Francisco on the west coast of the United States. We're about a 200-person company, and Codexis has existed for over 20 years. In fact, this year is our 23rd anniversary. We're a publicly traded company, and over that 2+ decade, the organization has really evolved, has been able to adjust to the challenges of the environment, and I think that is one of the themes, one of the takeaways from my 5 years from looking at the biotech industry. It is a constant change, that is part of the fabric. Now, Codexis today is selling roughly 50 engineered enzymes that are mostly used for small molecule API manufacturing, so in the pharmaceutical industry. Again, we probably produce about 20 metric tons of enzymes every year. But in addition to just providing these type of services, we also see ourselves as continuous tech innovators. So, 15 years ago, Codexis was on the forefront to developing, to demonstrating to the world that biocatalysts, that enzymes engineered to operate in process conditions could actually be used for uh, making pharmaceutical ingredients. For the most part, people thought at the time, "Oh my god, enzymes, you look at them a little mean and they keel over and fall apart." Uh, we were able to demonstrate with our engineering capabilities that you can use these very effectively and to the benefit of the environment, as well as to the benefit of the pocket, of the wallet. Economically, they also make sense. Since then, the journey has continued.
And you touched on the environment there, and of course, that's one of the 3 pillars that we think about as part of the Gap Summit this year. How are you thinking about reducing the environmental impact of some of your manufacturing and some of the, actual production of some of these enzymes?
Yeah. So I want to give you one example. What's currently front and center for us is the development of new manufacturing methods for oligonucleotides. Oligonucleotides, short RNA sequences, not mRNAs, but we're talking true oligonucleotides, 20, 25 building blocks long. Those type of modalities are among the most exciting, most potent emerging modalities in the therapeutic arena. To manufacture 1 kilogram of such an oligonucleotide, you are generating or you're needing roughly 3,000 kilograms of acetonitrile, organic solvent, flammable, toxic. In order to manufacture a kilogram, you need to invest over in the millions of dollars in infrastructure because you need to have the facilities to handle these kind of toxic chemicals or flammable chemicals. With an enzymatic approach, we can run the same process in a purely aqueous environment. No more need for organic solvents. The requirements, the infrastructure requirements are trivial. You know, give us a stir tank reactor and a column and a pump, and you're good to go. So it is that kind of possibility that makes all the difference in the world. Another good example for making small molecule drugs, small molecule API, a lot of the chemical synthesis require transition metal catalysts. Transition metals are expensive, They oftentimes are toxic. You have to make sure that you remove it effectively after the synthesis before you put it into a patient. All these things go away if you can instead use a biocatalyst, an engineered enzyme, for these processes. With all these, no longer needing organic solvents, no longer needing expensive, rare, expensive transition metal catalysts, you can make processes safer, you can simplify them, and not to be ignored, you can also streamline the supply chain because a lot of these materials, uh, you know, transition metals are oftentimes mined in Asia or in China. A lot of the organic solvents, bulk solvents, are supplied internationally. So geopolitically, by transitioning to a bioeconomy, you can actually move towards more locally sourced uh, raw materials for your manufacturing processes, giving you supply chain security and a certain level of independence from socioeconomical and geopolitical fluctuations.
That's a fascinating example and a very real example of, especially in the oligo space, 'cause that is indeed a very interesting space where a lot of leading pharma are also moving to explore as well. So really thank you for sharing that example of, mm, you know, thousands of, well, several tons of raw materials moving into a significantly lower amount of raw materials. Um, just linking into what you mentioned there, because you're describing the role that biotechs are playing in improving the supply chain, improving the yields, improving the sustainability. What role do others have in the ecosystem? I'm thinking here of the regulators, of the healthcare companies, pharma companies, governments. What is their role in all of this?
Oh, most certainly important contributions, different angles to driving innovation in this space. Uh, a lot of drug innovators, pharmaceutical industry, of course, for them, costs and environmental impact, sustainability are major drivers to encourage, to seek innovation in that space. Uh, Regulators and governments, in the current environment in the United States, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the US trying to onshore supply chain and manufacturing capabilities, which over the last few decades have been outsourced to lower cost countries. Uh, so for a company like us, it is indeed an opportunity to actually implement some of our innovation, some of our new technology, because if we find ourselves in a global environment where we are competing against established yet wasteful chemical processes, the pressure is significant and oftentimes prohibitive to really implement some of these new manufacturing methods. If we find ourselves in an environment where the level or the playing ground is leveled. Suddenly, there is room for innovation. There is an opportunity to, even at an initially slightly higher cost because of the novelty, to implement these new technologies. So, the government, with its guidance, with its insurance of supply chain, certainly can encourage, can support innovation.
I'm sure there's folks in the audience who will have additional questions on this space. So I will shift gears and
Sure.
in about 10 or 15 minutes, we'll open the questions up to the audience as well. So I'm going to just slightly shift gears to this area in the space of AI.
Mhm.
And I know Codexis has been looking a lot at AI and AI adoption. Where do you see yourself and where do you see the company in terms of that maturity curve of AI? Early adoption, sort of mature now? Are you already on the other side of that peak? Where do you see yourself?
Yeah. So let me say two things. When it comes to AI, it was also touched on yesterday. Tremendous opportunity, exciting future potential. for this type of technology to benefit, to streamline the bioeconomy. Having said that, especially kind of where I come from, Silicon Valley is infamous for hype, for overpromising. And my plea to the community is, can we please have more facts and less fiction? It's just nobody disputes the capabilities that predictive analytics adds towards streamlining discovery processes, be it in drugs, be it in engineering enzymes, be it in optimizing and securing manufacturing processes. But we need to step away from promising pie in the sky, which sets unrealistic expectations. I think Codexis can actually speak with some authority in this space. We have published evidence, if you want to say so. Back in 2007, the then team members actually released or published a Nature Biotech paper where they deployed a multi-component analysis approach towards predicting structure or sequence activity relationships within proteins, which was an important tool towards guiding the scientists, helping them to sort through the vast amount of data that is generated in our case, a protein engineering project. Uh, we've continued to advance this technology, implement the latest algorithms, and we continue today, I believe, to very effectively, very successfully leverage these predictive tools in helping our scientists. What we don't want to do is, again, move to a point where we conclude, oh, protein engineering, the way it's been done in a classic fashion, is out the door. Who needs bench work anymore nowadays? We can just do it all in the computer, which there are many out there that promise that kind of uh, approach. Reality is far from it. And so that's kind of where moderation in what the technology can do is really in our hands. We should be controlling the message.
And if I think about AI, there's a few ways of categorizing it. There's almost the operational, executional AI, so things like document authoring, which is of course super helpful and transformative for things like submissions to regulators and internal document preparation. But then there's the kind of more scientific AI, which is in the same way that ChatGPT predicts the next word in a sentence in a probabilistic manner. You can use the same technology to apply to proteins and talk about what is the next amino acid in this sequence to give us the kind of outputs that we need or the kind of characteristics we need.
Yeah.
How are you leveraging today in your workflow? You mentioned one example in terms of SAR. How are you leveraging AI beyond beyond that one use case? Is it sort of embedded throughout your R&D? Are you using it on the operational side as well?
Yeah. No, it certainly is an opportunity that impacts the entire enterprise. You've mentioned regulatory submissions, any kind of document processing. For those type of applications, it's tremendously effective and certainly widely utilized. Uh, on the engineering side, I think there is a little bit more nuance. If you look at today's system's ability to engineer proteins, we're talking antibodies, we're talking just defining the three-dimensional structure of a protein. These tools have proven themselves very effective. But when it comes to enzymes, especially enzymes that are used in industrial applications, we're looking at a very different challenge.
Mm.
Our enzymes, the way we operate them in a manufacturing process, oftentimes does not resemble anything like the enzymes that you find in nature. They operate at higher temperatures, they operate in the presence of organic solvents, they operate at substrate loads, at substrate concentrations that far exceed anything that the natural enzyme would ever encounter inside the cell. Yet a lot of today's engineering approaches or AI-driven engineering approaches, they rely on natural data or data on natural diversity for their training set. So you're training with apples, but then ultimately you want to deploy the AI to produce oranges. You know, we want to engineer enzymes far outside their natural habitat, if you want to say so, yet we don't have the data set. Now, Codexis is in a fortunate situation that we've been doing this for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So we do have a sizable data set. But I can tell you that even with the information we've collected over the last 2 decades, we have insufficient amounts to do this reliably. That's why I think today's technology is the AI is a good support tool, but it is not the magic wand that we can wave and build these predictions. So the deployment of these tools is specific to or differs in different aspects of the enterprise. Um, I think, again, research is one element. Manufacturing, it came up yesterday, digital twin technology is incredibly interesting for process optimization and for process monitoring. So there's a third component other than legal documentation, research, there's also in development. So across the board, you will see a lot of organizations exploring these capabilities, but they don't all operate at the same level yet.
Yeah. And maybe just going down this theme, you what sometimes we've now seen a lot of these AI first biotechs doing completely changing the way that they're doing their experiments so that they are generating data that better feeds their models.
Yes.
So for instance, indeed, you have more extremes being used in your experimental design, which you wouldn't necessarily need for a patient, but you are designing so that the AI algorithm gets better. Are you experimenting with that sort of workflow, designing fundamentally different experiments to train an AI model better rather than just for the purposes of industrial use?
Yeah. It came up yesterday as well, quality over quantity, or ideally both, but quality matters. The curation of high quality data that feeds into these algorithms is absolutely essential. And with that has come the need to change, first and foremost, the way we are conducting experiments, but also to change people that are conducting these experiments, how they report, how they observe the experimental progress, the data related to these experiments. So yeah, it matters.
And what are the biggest challenges you're seeing in adopting AI, leveraging AI,
E-
getting those efficiencies?
Easy, the human element. You've just touched on it. In order for us to leverage AI effectively, we need to change how we as individuals, as employees, are using these tools and how we are collecting information that feed into these tools. Um, I think observing it in my organization, but also talking to colleagues throughout the bioeconomy or biotech industry, we easily conclude that the human element, the change, that the change in thinking, the change in acting, and an everyday work environment that is required probably presents the biggest challenges.
And because I think it's probably most relevant for everybody in this room, given we are all humans, and you're saying humans may be the problem or the greatest challenge. What exactly is it? Is it difficulty in adoption? Is it not having some of those core skills and understanding of how AI works and therefore getting the best out of it? What exactly is it?
That's a loaded question. I think it's that humans by nature are creatures of habit. And if somebody has been doing work in a certain way for the last 5, 10, 20 years, for them to suddenly be told, oh no, you need to do this completely differently, is to many a real challenge. And, the term change management to help employees, to help the team to transition to that new way is where the real crux is.
Very fascinating. And I mean, we're just talking really about the advent of LLMs and those sorts of technologies, but we're already moving to now agentic AI. Mm. I've worked with some of the sort of pharma companies in this space experimenting with the use of agentic, and I think that's now even becoming more disruptive in terms of what that's doing to people who've been working in the space for, as you said, 20, 30 years, really. Um, sorry, please.
Oh, yeah, maybe one last point. You also don't wanna underestimate, a lot of people when asked to change their habits, to work with AI,
Mm.
there is an inherent fear that the introduction of this technology will result in the eventual displacement or, making themselves obsolete. And that fear is real, and, that's something to also take into consideration, if you think about leveraging these tools in your organization to really help your team members, your employees to work through this transition, to make them realize that this is part of a natural progression, this is part of ongoing change, and that on the back end of this is an opportunity because I think the human element is always gonna play a role, in this is not a fully autonomous, system, at least not in the biotech industry. I think there's always gonna be a human, need or the need for humans, and for people to understand that will help in making that transition feasible.
I think that's a very natural point, I think, for us to maybe open up to some questions from the audience. But thank you very much for answering some of
Yeah,
this. That's fascinating.
hope this was helpful.
Um, I'll go actually just to the first person I saw just at the front row there.
Thank you for the amazing talk. I really liked it. And as I'm Arushi and I did my PhD and postdoc in Germany and now I transitioned to industry. And what really stuck to me was the transition from academia to industry. So being a professor at Emory and then going back to after 17 years to going into industry, could you touch upon the journey like because the mindset is completely different there. And if you had the chance to go back now to academia, what would you bring back with you?
It's a great question. I very much agree that yes, working in industry is requiring a different mindset, a different priority. Uh, you know, Academia, you have a great idea in the morning in the shower, you can go to the lab, you can implement it, you can explore it. In industry, of course, much more kind of all the opportunities need to be evaluated against, economic targets, etc. So that requires a mind shift or a change in mindset. Having said that, if I were to go back, I would pry it into a university environment. And in fact, I must admit that thought has crossed my mind is to bring back that economic, impact mindset into the academic environment. I think academic pursuit, just creating knowledge for the sake of knowledge is exciting, but to also take into consideration economic effects, impact, when assessing opportunities, projects, priorities, I think is something that's missing, in an academic environment. A lot of, faculty members think that their brilliant ideas, as esoteric as they sometimes can be, will immediately translate into a patent and then, you know, fame and fortune, when in reality, some of these ideas are just not at the point where they are convincing enough to an industry, to a company to, for example, take a license. So I think there's a real opportunity to help faculty, to help the academic community to gauge what is needed to effectively transition innovation, new discoveries from an academic world into industry. There's a gap. I'm not so sure about Europe, but certainly in the United States. I'm s- Yeah, I take your word for it. Yeah, but so it is in the US. And so I think having lived in both worlds, for lack of a better word, I speak the academic language and I can now speak the industrial language and hopefully would help to bring more of those ideas to real industrial impact.
Completely. And I also think the transition back, it sometimes can be very interesting. So people going back from industry to academia, they also bring back a lot of leadership.
Yeah. I do wanna say, yesterday at lunch, it came up about how rare it was for people to do these transitions either way, and I would actually disagree. I now know, and maybe it's because I've done it myself, and so naturally you're seeing, you're noticing many more colleagues that go through the same transition. There is a good number of people that have successfully transitioned from one world to the other. So if you ever wonder yourself whether you need to make a choice at an early stage in your career and that is absolute, I would encourage you to not think about this so narrowly. You can transition successfully between the worlds with the understanding that, yeah, you need to be willing to change your thinking and your priorities, uh, but it is certainly doable.
Should we move on?
Thank you so much both. That was such a clear discussion. I wonder, Stefan, if you could expand and comment a little bit more on what you think the factors are that have enabled Codexis to survive and thrive for these past 20 years, as you said. I wonder if it's more stemming from like brilliant top-down leadership, or whether it's the case that like fundamentally there's always demand in the market for these engineered enzymes, and that like Codexis always has a niche in the market in that sense.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think part of the success of that 20+ year journey that Codexis has embarked on has been a excellent technology, a really powerful technology that has enabled us to, in the early days, Codexis was focused on biofuels, conversion of glucose to ethanol, bioethanol, uh, to have impact in that world, to then, when biofuels suddenly became unpopular, to shift over to pharmaceuticals, small molecule API manufacturing, to then shift towards biologics and life sciences, and more recently into oligonucleotide synthesis. The fundamental technology is, I think, a key element to the long-term success. I wouldn't necessarily put credit to the leadership team. It's the spirit, the company culture, the resilience, and the agility, the willingness for change that has helped the organization transition through all these, you know, people at the time sometimes compare it to a roller coaster or a rodeo. That's certainly not too far-fetched. Uh, I do wanna say, though, that, if you're under the impression that all these transitions through the different businesses, through the different challenges that the company has faced over the 20+ years, that hasn't all been, an easy journey. There have been at least 2 events within the company history where, over 50% of the employees had to be let go from the organization, so very drastic countermeasures to account for the economic realities. So there were a lot of sweat, tears, and involved in this process as well, which one should not forget.
But I think it points to your company culture that you still recognize that those things happen and remember them and take those lessons forward as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to bias it too much, but I just saw some hands up on this side. Do we want to go to the second row?
Thank you. Thank you for the great conversation. My name is Peter. I'm a medicinal chemist, and I have a question. When it comes to biocatalysis, I'm curious, in your opinion, after spending so much time, I guess, in academia and our industry, what are some of the biggest bottlenecks that you see in biocatalysts becoming more mainstream in the manufacturing process or in general the drug development process?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. Honestly, it's the same old problem. There are still far too many engineers and scientists, chemists out there that operate under the assumption that enzymes are something fragile and not really viable in an industrial setting. You know, I do want to say in the last 2 decades, the perception has started to change. But the fact that in academic environments, a lot of organic chemists are still very reluctant to teach in their courses, in their organic chemistry courses, the use of enzymes as part of the synthetic toolkit speaks volumes. It speaks volumes to kind of why enzymes haven't taken over the world more than or have had more impact than they've had to date. It also maybe is a little bit of a hint at, the academic world, which oftentimes is portrayed as the forward thinkers, as the innovators, the thinking about the future of a field, and how that reflects a very conservative kind of change management came up earlier, how people just like the world they live in and don't really want to change things around too much. That is certainly a major challenge to biocatalysis today, to this day.
The question right at the front. Hello. Thank you for a great discussion. I'm Dennis from Norway, and the question is, speaking on behalf of your now executive experience, taking into account and assuming that team and science technology is great, what would be the third variable on the way to success of any project, program, or idea you ever worked with?
Oh gosh. Luck. No, I'm not joking. Having good timing, being at the right place at the right time, it's scary because it's not something you can really control. But there is something to be said. Uh, we've touched a little bit on oligonucleotides. You know, so Codexis embarked on developing this technology 2.5, 3 years ago is when we transitioned towards, hey, let's develop the catalysts, the processes, the manufacturing capabilities using these enzymes. Back in the days, anybody we've talked to, investors, the analysts, even some of our customers were basically like, there's no problem there. What are you trying to solve for? What does the future there look like? We were convinced, talking to innovators in that space, that there was, the beginning of that hockey stick, that there was the beginning of an exponential growth. But very few people saw that. It was the belief in our own data that drove us to invest in the technology development. And fast forward 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, there was a company, a drug innovator company in the United States that came out of stealth mode that announced that they're now having a lead candidate for a cardiovascular indication. We're talking hundreds of millions of patients globally that could potentially benefit from that kind of drug. And they're predicting that in the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to need 25 metric tons of API of that drug substance manufactured for just this one asset. So were we lucky? Did we do our homework? Did we believe in ourselves? And was that vindicated? Yes. But there is an element of timing that is hard to predict. Sometimes you have to believe in yourself and just tune out all the naysayers.
It's indeed seems like a bit of a combination of reacting to the externalities in the context of that biofuel example that you gave, but then also sometimes shaping the market, creating an opportunity for others to then come in and start to scale up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we had a couple of questions on this side, maybe take the second row.
Thank you so much for your insights. My question had to do with adaptability, I guess today's pillar. I was quite impressed with how you were talking about scaling up production during COVID immediately after you had taken office. So could you take us through what enabled you to succeed, and if you think we're now, as an industry and your company specifically, if you'd be better prepared, and what makes us better prepared for a crisis like that if it were to happen again?
So to your first point, 110% of the credit goes to an absolutely amazing team that I have the privilege of working with. It is I have right now a little over 50 R&D people working on the development of assets, and it is really to their credit, their willingness to be flexible, shifting work schedules, coming to work at 4 o'clock in the morning so that they could work the early shift, and some of them being willing to work until 10 or 11 o'clock at night for the late shift. So it's that, the culture element that really allowed us to succeed, I firmly believe. Uh, as to are we better prepared for the next one? I'm afraid to say no. Uh, not necessarily we as an organization, but we as a society. Uh, Look at what's going on in the U.S. right now with you know the thinking around vaccine, and how a lot of development, innovation in that space is being shut down because there's a lot of information and misinformation circulating. There's a lot of ignorance of the true benefits of some of these highly innovative new technologies that have been brought out, mRNA vaccines explicit or specifically. So, the one thing in my more cynical moments, the one thing we've learned from history is that we haven't learned anything. So I do feel that we are not necessarily better prepared. Now, the government is trying to make an effort of bringing some of the drug manufacturing into the country, which probably during COVID created some bottlenecks in supplying just common, antibiotics, etc. But those are relatively small efforts in what surely is, it's not a question if, it's a question when the next pandemic hits. So sorry for a little of a gloomy response there, but that's my personal belief.
So Adelina has surreptitiously informed me we have time for one more question. So I'm going to go up to the top right-hand side there. So I think you've had your hand up since the beginning.
Thank you for sharing your insightful experiences. I'm Jose Mesa from Peru, and I actually worked at Revolution Medicines right next to Codexis a few years ago. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how do you think the location of Codexis in Redwood City and the broader Silicon Valley, proximity to all these pharma companies and tech innovation has shaped their success of Codexis, and if you feel like the company would achieve a similar success in any other location in the world.
Oh my.
Question.
Yeah, that's
Very topical as well.
yeah. Silicon Valley is an incredibly inspiring environment to work in, to live in. Having said that, I don't believe that it is essential for the kind of innovation we've seen. First and foremost, there are many other biotech hubs around the world. Just within the United States, I'm thinking San Diego, I'm thinking Boston. I've recently read an article about North Carolina, of all places, as an incredibly, vibrant environment, lower region for biotech. So, yeah, Silicon Valley is not the must-be location to be successful. Having said that, it does attract a lot of talent, And cross-functionally, if you're talking about AI, where would I want to find people that can really drive innovation, the latest, the best in that kind of environment? Well, the tech industry, which happens to be down the road from Redwood City. So there's something to be said about it, but not essential for success, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thank
for the
you.
time. I think we will now move on to our next session, but I think just on behalf of everybody, really want to thank you for your time, for Bed and Bake Group, for